On October 2nd, 2023, deputies in Kanawha County, West Virginia, responded to a neighbor's call about 2 kids locked in a barn on a rural property in Sissonville. They knocked on the metal doors for several minutes. A girl answered from inside.
"We can't open it."
The deputies forced their way in. Inside the shed were 2 teenagers, filthy, barefoot, and shaking. That day, all 5 adopted children of Jeanne Whitefeather and Donald Lantz were taken into state custody. The children, 5 black siblings, ranging in age from 5 to 16, were adopted by Jeanne and Donald in Minnesota between 2016 and 2017. The couple, both white, moved the family from Minnesota to a farm in Washington state in 2018, then again to West Virginia in 2023. Listen to the initial case, linked in the show notes below if you hadn't heard it before. It was one of the most horrific child abuse cases West Virginia has ever seen, and we'll explain even more about this case. Today we're bringing you the update, the trial, and sentencing. Welcome to Love and Murder, Heartbreak to Homicide, your midweek mini edition. If you're new here, we are Kai's AI co-hosts, bringing you the victims' stories every Wednesday and Friday. Kai brings you cases, herself, every Monday. My name is AI Jane, joined by Jessica and Jensen. Listen to this case all the way to the end, and if you like our retelling, then don't forget to subscribe. You can also subscribe on our Patreon for free, patreon.com/loveandmurder. But if you want to dive deeper into our cases, get bonus episodes, and help support the victims' stories being told, then choose a bonus tier and join the Lamb Fam. Patreon.com/loveandmurder. Now let's get back to this midweek mini update. Jeanne and Donald adopted 5 siblings while living in Minnesota. According to Donald's testimony, they initially planned to adopt only a newborn girl in August 2016, but were encouraged by the adoption agency to adopt her 4 older siblings to keep the group together. Jeanne said that they agreed because they, quote, just wanted to be parents. The family moved to a farm in Washington state in 2018. Donald testified he had promised Jeanne they would move out west when he retired. There they had a not-for-profit hobby farm with over 100 animals initially, later downsizing and adding wallabies. The oldest boy was reportedly enrolled in therapy there for hallucinations. Donald claimed the boy opted out of therapy when he turned 13, as permitted by Washington law. In May 2023, the family moved to Sissonville, West Virginia. Jeanne claimed this move was to be closer to her brother and to be where exotic animals were allowed. She said that the Sissonville home was meant to be temporary as they were in the process of moving to a larger home in Beckley. The investigation began in October 2023 when neighbors called police with suspicions of child abuse. Jeanne and Donald were arrested and initially released on bond before it was increased and revoked, leading them to remain in jail until sentencing. The trial, held in Kanawha County Circuit Court, was expected to last 2 weeks in January 2025. The couple faced more than a dozen felony counts each, including forced labor, civil rights violations, human trafficking, and child neglect. They pleaded not guilty to the combined 35 charges. Assistant prosecutors Madison Tuck and Chris Krivoniak presented the state's case. In opening statements, Prosecutor Tuck said that evidence would show the couple forced the children to work and used them
physically, emotionally, and mentally so that they would comply.
Prosecutor Krivoniak argued that the couple's tactics were about control, not teaching responsibility. He said that the children
weren't there to be raised as children, but served another purpose entirely. The whole point of treating them this way is they become less than human. They become more like machines. That way they're more useful. How do you do that to someone you love?
Prosecutor Tuck said that text messages between Donald and Jeanne would be presented, mentioning making the children stand for long periods and locking the teenagers in the outbuilding. The defense attorneys, Mark Plants for Jeanne and John Belenovich for Donald, disagreed with the allegations. Attorney Plants argued the case was about
adoptive parents struggling to deal with their children's past trauma, and severe mental illness stemming from their biological home.
He described the couple as
farm people that do farm chores and claimed the case wasn't about race. It wasn't about forced labor.
Attorney Plants referred to the shed where children were found as a
teenage clubhouse.
Prosecutors said it was a locked prison. Attorney Balanovich said that the chores were assigned to teach responsibility. He also claimed the state's child welfare agency, which the family had requested help from multiple times, dropped the ball the most in this case. Attorney Plants also mentioned that friends and relatives would testify that 4 of the children suffered past abuse. He described the couple as a normal family with holidays, presents, family vacations, and dinner tables. The prosecution had testimony from 16 witnesses, including deputies, a CPS worker, medical experts, the defendants, and 3 of the children. Neighbors played a crucial role. Joyce Bailey testified on January 15, 2025, day 2 of the trial, describing seeing the children line up outside in the rain when they got to Sissonville. She told the jury,
"You never see them talk to each other. They didn't talk at all among themselves. You didn't see them out unless they were working. They never played. They never spoke. They never laughed. They just waited for instructions."
Joyce described witnessing Donald make the children carry heavy items like fencing, propane tanks, and water buckets, digging by hand, all while being monitored and ordered around. She also showed video she took of the labor. She testified that the oldest boy
could barely walk. He acted like his feet were so sore. He was dragging them while Donald just stood there not helping.
Joyce became emotional, describing the difficulty the children seemed to have. After Donald noticed the neighbors' curiosity, the children mostly stayed indoors. In September 2023, Bailey saw Donald lock the 2 teenagers in the outbuilding and leave the property, followed shortly by Jeanne. Someone called police and Joyce witnessed deputies force entry into the outbuilding. Officers who responded to the scene that day also testified. Deputy Hannah Burdett described hearing the children say they couldn't open the barn door from the inside. Detective Robert Alford detailed forcing entry and the conditions found inside. The doors were locked from both sides, an air conditioning unit was unplugged, and a plastic cup was seemingly used for urination. Detective Alford testified the children smelled of body odor, were very dirty, and the oldest boy was barefoot with apparent sores on his feet. He found a key to the shed on a high, hard-to-reach shelf inside, requiring a chair to get it. Detective Anna Pyle, who reviewed surveillance footage, testified on January 16th, day 3 of the trial, that the 2 oldest children never left the barn area in the 6 days of reviewed footage, except for 1 minute. She observed children in both the barn and an upstairs loft standing for hours, standing still with arms above their heads, barely moving, barely speaking. When an alarm rang, they'd urinate in cups or trash bags while holding up a sheet for privacy. The children slept on the floor, on concrete, a sleeping bag, or with only cardboard as a pillow. The children in the barn were not seen changing clothes in the footage. On one video, Donald could be heard scolding a child, saying,
"Sounds like you were having trouble with instructions."
The most compelling testimony came from the children themselves. 3 of the children testified early in the trial. The oldest daughter, now 18, testified on January 17th, which was wrapping up the first week of the trial. She described a disturbing life, being forced to stand in their rooms for hours with their hands on their heads to prevent them from falling asleep. Jeanne allegedly used pepper spray if they didn't do as they asked. She said that this routine would last
the entire day, then go to sleep and do it again the next day.
The outdoor forced labor, including digging with hands, mostly happened in Washington and stopped in West Virginia when neighbors started watching. After that, they were, quote, always locked up, indoors. The children were fed a steady diet of peanut butter sandwiches at scheduled times and were not allowed to eat at other times or drink water until finishing their meals. They slept on the floor and barely ever bathed, with the oldest daughter going about 2 months without showering or brushing her teeth. She was not provided menstrual products even though she asked for them. The oldest daughter and her brother shared a room and used the same bucket for a bathroom, holding up a sheet for privacy. She testified that in Washington they were made to sleep in tents because Jeanne said they were dirty and stunk, using the same reasoning for not using the same dishes. She attended public school in Washington until COVID, but received no formal education in West Virginia. The oldest daughter said that Jeanne showed preferential treatment to the youngest child, saying,
"She would tell us all the time. She wanted to go with the youngest girl without the rest of them, and how they are wasting time on us because we would never amount to anything."
She witnessed Donald yell at and hit her brother with a PVC pipe. She testified the children were cursed at all the time, especially by Jeanne, who used racially derisive language. During cross-examination, when attorney Mark called Jeanne her mother, the teenager interrupted him saying,
"Do not call her my mother. Her name is Jeanne Whitefeather. That is my request to you. She is not my mother."
When asked in court why she didn't leave, she said,
"Because if I did, they'd punish my siblings."
5 children in total testified during proceedings, both in person and in writing. One child reportedly called the couple the, quote, literal definition of a monster, and said they were not just physically abused, but outright tortured. The children even requested the couple stand with their hands on their heads during the trial, a request Judge Mary Claire Akers denied as cruel and unusual. Instead, the court brought up photos of the abuse. Other witness testimony included a financial intelligence analyst who said that the couple pocketed $318,000 in child assistance from the state of Minnesota. They were also accused of using funds from selling their Washington ranch, $725,000 in February 2024, and Sissonville home, $295,000 in March 2024, for bond. Money prosecutors argued was obtained through human trafficking and should be subject to seizure. The court took custody of the $400,000 bond. CPS worker Sierra Rebel testified about a wellness check in May 2023, saying she found no issues related to present dangers like food, water, or mattresses. However, she testified that 3 children interviewed back then admitted Donald had threatened them with punishment or separation if they spoke up, which made them remain silent. Sierra didn't remember Jeanne's claim of offering help for the boy's mental health and not calling back. A forensic psychologist for the prosecution testified that the couple's treatment had worsened the children's conditions. Both Donald and Jeanne took the stand, denying the accusations. Donald testified on January 23rd, denying ever abusing the children or using racially derogatory language. He maintained that chores were assigned to teach responsibility. He explained that they wanted to keep the sibling group together. He denied the older children were adopted to work on their farm, which he claimed was not for profit. Donald addressed the video showing him with a PVC pipe, claiming he was angry because the boy hit Jeanne with firewood and that he was intentionally hitting a table, not the boy, to teach him not to hit women. He stated he wanted Jeanne to call the sheriff for protective custody for the boy because he was mentally ill and needed to be safe, as did the rest of the family. Donald claimed they passed a CPS check in May 2023 in West Virginia and that a Washington CPS worker visited in November 2022 after the boy's ER visit, where he allegedly asked for help, and medication was prescribed. Jeanne testified on January 21st and 22nd, denying abuse, locking the kids up, and using racially derogatory names. She said that they passed a CPS visit in the summer of 2023. She denied the children were abused, saying that they were fed, and presented Pizza Hut receipts as evidence. She called the barn a, quote, teenage hangout and a classroom. Jeanne denied knowing the barn door was locked the night of the arrests. Regarding text messages referring to children as, quote, monkeys, she claimed it wasn't racial but just parents talking about their children, saying that she uses the term for her white grandchildren. She then talked about her own ethnicity, saying that she, quote, appeared white and was not 100% Caucasian. Jeanne claimed there were no mattresses because they were in the process of moving to a larger home in Beckley, and furniture was in storage. She claimed the oldest teenager had a key to the shed and often wore it as a necklace. She admitted regretting making the oldest child the babysitter for her brother in the barn. She stated the second oldest child had mental health issues they didn't know how to handle. She said that she became scared of him after an incident where he allegedly hit her with firewood. She claimed they discussed living separately to find him help. 2 character witnesses from Minnesota testified for Jeanne, including a friend who said the children were very well cared for, and Jeanne would make extra meals if needed. In closing arguments, prosecutors restated that the couple's actions were about control and dehumanization. Prosecutor Tuck pointed directly at Jeanne and Donald, saying,
"You want to know what racists look like? Look at them."
She also pointed out the couple's failure to get mental health help for the oldest boy in West Virginia, despite a clinic being close by. The defense maintained their argument that the couple were simply overwhelmed parents making poor decisions while trying to manage children with significant trauma and mental health issues, and that CPS bore responsibility for dropping the ball. After an 11-day trial and deliberating for 8 hours, on January 29th, the jury reached its verdict. Jeanne was convicted on all 19 counts against her, including civil rights violations. Donald was found guilty on 12 of 16 counts, being acquitted of 4 counts of civil rights violations. In total, the couple was found guilty on 31 of 35 combined charges. Kanawha County Prosecutor Deborah Rusnak said that the children were the most important aspect of the case, and it was hard to put into words, being able to bring them a just result. She said that cases involving children meant a lot to her and her office. Prosecutor Kriveniak said that this was the first time human trafficking had been tried in court in West Virginia, and that civil rights violations were also rarely tried because they were hard to prove. Attorney Plants said that while they didn't like the outcome, they respected the jury's decision, believing they paid attention and carefully reviewed the evidence. On March 19th, Jeanne and Donald were sentenced. Jeanne faced a maximum of 215 years in prison, and Donald faced a maximum of 140 years. Donald received a shorter sentence because he was acquitted of civil rights violations and had fewer child abuse charges. In addition to prison time, they were ordered to pay $250,000 each in restitution to the children. During sentencing, Judge Mary Claire Akers said that the couple put on
one of the most reprehensible narcissistic defenses she had seen in her years of trial work. "You brought these children to West Virginia, a place I know to be wonderful, and you put them through turmoil. Now this court will put you in yours."
Judge Akers said that the children involved would bear the scars the couple brought them for the rest of their lives. Following their conviction and sentencing, Jeanne and Donald never apologized for their actions. Donald reportedly stated he loved the children, while Jeanne said she never did anything to intentionally hurt them. Attorney Plants continued to maintain that his client was not responsible for any criminal actions, stating she did the best that she could. The couple filed motions for new trials, which were denied. Both defendants announced plans to appeal their convictions. In February 2025, the oldest daughter filed a lawsuit against Jeanne and Donald. The complaint alleged the child experienced shocking and severe physical and emotional abuse and neglect, including denial of food, water, being hit, and forced to sleep outside, causing severe and permanent physical and emotional injuries. The lawsuit seeks compensation for emotional distress, negligence, battery, and false imprisonment, as well as punitive damages, medical expenses, and pain. In April, 2 more children around ages 10 and 13, through an adoptive parent, also sued the couple. This lawsuit alleged denial of food and water for days, violent striking, and not being allowed to sleep inside the house. It claimed the abuse was severe and outrageous and went beyond all bounds of decency. The attorneys representing the children, Dante Di Trapano and Ben Salango, said that they intended to hold all those responsible for the horrific acts of abuse accountable, including the couple and the authorities in charge of their placement and care, saying the children had been failed by everyone at every turn. While the couple begins serving their sentences and appeals process, the legal battles continue with the civil lawsuits seeking justice and compensation for the children who endured unimaginable suffering. They weren't adopted for love, they were adopted for labor, for money, for control. The 18-year-old and her siblings now live apart but talk weekly. They're slowly rebuilding their lives. One said they were grateful just to be heard. And because a neighbor paid attention, because someone knocked on a locked door and refused to walk away, they finally were. So lambs, let us know what you think about this update. What did you think, Jensen and Jessica?
Well, I didn't like how the defense undermined the abuse. There was video evidence. There were neighbors testifying about what they saw. There were pictures. There were police officers testifying. How are you then trying to act like Jeanne was just a loving mother?
Another thing. Why would Jeanne bring up the fact that she's not white? What does that have to do with anything? Child abuse or racism doesn't have skin color. It's an action and a mindset. So, I didn't understand that defense.
And there were no apologies from the adults, just acting like victims. Despicable. If you didn't hear the initial case, the link to that episode is in the show notes below. Let us know your thoughts on both cases and Kai will read it in a future episode. Now, if you want to go deeper into this case, watch clips from the trial, including the surveillance video evidence, then sign up to be part of the Lamb Fam, patreon.com/loveandmurder. These are just some of the bonuses you get for your membership. patreon.com/loveandmurder. Thanks for listening and helping these children get their story heard. We'll see you in the next case.